Welcome you again. We'll keep on discussing what we've got into many aspects of what cities are doing during the morning. Just as a short recap for our guests that are here now, we heard about a lot of innovation, a lot of multi-level governance, important tasks and challenges that we face in cities. And of course, one of the most common and pressure challenges outside governance and outside knowledge is the financing and the funding. So in this session, we will hear with this beautiful panel here, very robust panel as well, a lot of speakers. So we'll have a lot of different insights from these perspectives for the specific region of Africa. And to guide this conversation, please let me welcome Nicola Iezza, the Urban Transition Mission Funding and Finance Help Desk Manager from the Global Covenant of Majors. Nicola.
Thank you very much, Carl. I hope you can hear me from online. I should be standing here, right? Yeah, okay, great. So welcome everybody for the session. As Carl was saying, Funders Dialogue for Africa. We have spoke a lot about finance already in the previous session. That was one of the main topics. We have shown you on the platform the two main tools that we're using. One is the Funding Watch, and the other one is the tool that I try to personify, which is the Financing Funding Help Desk. I'm the manager of it. I'm the person that tries to connect the cities that are part of the Urban Transition Mission with potential funding and financing sources. It's not casual that there are two names there, funding and financing, because we try both to work for getting funding like grants for mostly research and innovation action to the cities and scout them and signposting them, but also for financing, which is connecting them for infrastructural projects to development banks and to institutions that will lend money and solution for sustainable infrastructures in city. So those are the two main themes, quite different ones, of course, that we try to support for our cities with a very curated approach. We really try to listen to the needs, but via the platform and via me, of course, as I was saying, to try to grasp what is happening on the ground. We have a form for you to compile, to sign, to signal what projects you are undergoing, what projects you might be willing to develop, so that we keep a library of those that we are able to support you with and doing a little bit of signposting for you. Before maybe delving into that, we have a lot of panelists, as you see here, and a lot of different inputs that will come throughout the panel. So to cut it short, because we don't have much time, I would maybe like to give the floor, because we spoke about financing indeed, to John Michael LaSalle, which is PPF Connector Manager at CCFLA from CPI, which will guide us a little bit through what is the data that are coming from the updated report from the CCFLA on cities climate finance for 2024, and also some numbers from Africa to set the scene a little bit for this conversation. So John Michael, thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. So I'm John Michael LaSalle from the Cities Climate Finance Leadership Alliance, or CCFLA. And we recently launched a report on the state of cities climate finance. This is the second report we did looking at all the money flowing into cities for climate globally from public and private. We can go to the next slide. See, in 21 and 2022, which are the latest years we have data for, we were able to track $831 billion on average per year going into cities. I want to highlight a couple of different characteristics about that financing that I think is really relevant for understanding where there are resources and where there are gaps. If we can go to the next slide, one of the very positive findings is that since 2017, the financing to cities has more than doubled, going from 382 billion per year up to 831. And you can see the lighter color is if we had comparable data, but we were able to improve our data, improve our methodology, and that's the dark line. So you can see it's not just our research was better, but actually there's more money for cities. Can we go to the next slide? And one finding I think was quite interesting, that 49% came from private sources, whether that was households, companies, private banks, and 22% came from public actors, governments, development finance institutions. The remainder we weren't able to determine. On the next slide, you can see within mitigation finance, so any money going to reduce emissions, so that transportation was the majority of the mitigation financing. And of that, most of that was going into electric vehicles that were being purchased by households. So a big part of that private financing is actually households buying new vehicles for themselves. Go to the next slide. One of the findings that I think highlights the challenges we're facing are that adaptation finance is quite low. Out of the over the hundreds of billions, so less than 10 billion was directly going to finance. And in addition, there was about 5 billion that went to both mitigation and adaptation that had dual benefits. And I think that highlights the challenge, because we know that we need a lot more investment to make cities resilient to the impacts of climate change. On the next slide, another challenging finding is that of the total financing that we see, only 11% went to emerging markets and developing economies, fairly middle income countries, and only 1% went to least developed countries. So the flow of financing is very inequitable and is primarily going to North America, Europe, and China. On the next slide, we can see also that in most regions, the majority of financing is domestic. We talk a lot about international financing, about development finance and its role in climate, but actually, for most of the world, domestic financing is the majority, with the exception of sub-Saharan Africa, where 69% of financing was from international sources. Then on the next slide, we also updated our needs assessment for mitigation. So how much money do we need to reach the climate targets set in the Paris Agreement, or just within cities? We found for mitigation in 2022, we were at $814 billion US dollars. But until 2030, we need $4.3 trillion per year to fully meet our needs and meet the climate targets. So the urban climate finance gap is still massive despite the rapid growth in financing. We see after 2030, the needs will increase even more, up to 6 trillion per year. So we have a positive news that financing is increasing, but really challenging news that the money isn't necessarily going where it needs to go to geographically, and it's not reaching the level that we need to fully meet our climate goals. On the next slide, I want to also highlight, looking at this by sector, you can see every sector is falling short. And then one more slide. Wanted to do a little bit of a dive into some of the particularities for Africa, since that's the focus of this session. And the region does have some unique characteristics. We saw 14 billion in financing for Africa. 9 billion of that was for North Africa, and the remaining 5 billion went to sub-Saharan Africa. So even within Africa, we see there are these disparities in where finance is flowing. Energy was the largest sector, followed by cross-sectoral projects that included more than one sector within them, and then transportation. And this was within sub-Saharan Africa. And as I mentioned, 69% of the financing was from international sources, which is unique compared to any of the other regions that we looked at. And the financing for adaptation is very low, less than 1 billion per year in adaptation finance. And we know that this doesn't correspond to the projects cities have and what they're looking to finance. We know from CDP that cities have over $500 million in water projects alone that they're looking for financing, and we're seeing total adaptation is less than 1 billion. I think on that serious note, that some of the good news I would like to bring is that There are resources, and if we can go to the next slide. I lead, as Nicola mentioned, the PPF connector, which stands for Project Preparation Facilities. And one of the key barriers we see is the pipeline of investment-ready bankable projects. And project preparation facilities can help cities with technical assistance, sometimes with grant funding, to prepare projects so they can secure financing, and we can increase this investment. So on the next slide, see, when we talked about project preparation, we're talking about taking a project from that initial idea and scoping it, developing a concept note, doing a pre-feasibility study to assess different options and identify the best one, a feasibility study to really dig down deep and understand the technical, the financial, the economic, the social, the legal requirements to make this project viable. And then there's structuring the management and the financing for the project, and then actually closing the transaction where you work with a financier to get the financing you need for that project, or funding, because Nicola mentioned both funding and financing are really important for these projects. On the next slide, I wanted to give a couple of brief numbers to give you an idea of the range of support that we see from PPFs. 85% of them provide technical assistance, so they will hire a consultant or have technical staff that can prepare studies, can advise cities. 35% of them can provide grants to actually provide money to the cities to fund work preparing projects. And a quarter of them also can provide financing. So they will prepare projects and finance them. And normally that's a two-step process, but if you get preparation from them, it makes it much more likely you'll be able to get financing from the financial institution they are housed within, an infrastructure fund they are connected to. The types of facilities does vary quite a bit. On the next slide, also see the majority of PPS support feasibility stage. So they're looking for projects that have already done some work, and they're there to really help with the more in-depth technical studies, but there's support at concept and scoping, pre-feasibility, and with structuring and transactions as well. On the next slide. So I want to show there's support across all different sectors as well. We see the water, sanitation, and solid waste have the most support. We think that makes a lot of sense given the mandates of local governments and the projects that we see them trying to put forward. But transportation and mobility, renewable energy, and energy efficiency also have quite a bit of support, with over half of all PPFs supporting those sectors. And then if we go to the one final slide, on the CCFLA website, and you can access it through the UTMC app as well, we have a directory of project preparation facilities, and you can go there and put in your country, the sector of your project, and what stage you're at, and get a list of PPFs with information about what support they provide, how you can apply for support, and a link to their website to find more detailed information. With that, I want to hand it back to Nicola. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much to Michael for this very interesting presentation and all the numbers that, of course, are very difficult to collect, but very important also for us to understand a little bit where we stand. Sorry, for financing the urban transitions. And with that said, maybe I will just add to the next part of the session, which is the panel discussion. As we see, we have a lot of dear panelists here that have joined us. And maybe I would like to start with the mayor of Walvis Bay, Mr. Trevino Forbes. For those, you have already seen him in the previous session, but just for those who weren't here before, he's the mayor of Walvis Bay in Namibia, and is part both of the Urban Transition Mission and COMSA and ICLEI Africa. Maybe my first question for you, Mayor Forbes, is to you have seen all those numbers, you have seen what's coming in and what's maybe not coming in for African cities. Do you have any reaction or prompts, and do you feel something resembles what you see daily in your local reality?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm not a big numbers person, but it was quite shocking, but a revelation to the truth on the ground, that we could see that in terms of climate funding, Africa, in terms of climate change, Africa contributes the least, we suffer the most, and we benefit the least. That's in short what I can say about what I've just seen. And I think it's also a matter of obtaining the funding, not being educated, not being on the right platforms, not being able to obtain that funding that also contributes to us not getting the funding. So that is why, once again, I would say that platforms such as this, exposure such as this, is very important for African cities, not only African cities, but towns and villages as well, to get that exposure and know how to tap into this grant funding that is available. I always say you can't blame somebody. You can't blame the people that gives the grant funding if they do not know about your problems and your lack of infrastructure and all of those things. So you need to reach out if you want to make a difference within your local setting, in your city, in your town. And it's a bit shocking that the numbers do not reflect positively in favor of Africa. And I just said it in the previous discussion that Africa remains I almost want to say the mine to the rest of the world. All resources are extracted from Africa. And as long as we do not benefit from our own resources, but there is also a governance issue that governments are not taking care of the people. We don't have people-centric governments in Africa. Elsewhere around the world, they put their residents and their people, their communities, they put them first. In Africa, we have barely politics, to be honest and to be brutal. We look after ourselves as politicians and the people come last. And that is the reason you can see the reflection of the funding coming to Africa as it is. And also you must have a good track record of transparency and accountability. And that is also something lacking within our governments, in our towns. So I think we as Africans should do more to be able to be trusted with outside funding from the EU and whatever other fundings that is available. So yeah, a bit disappointed, but the reality is it is what it is. It is what we saw. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Forbes. And indeed, it is disappointing, and that's also why we try to support you as much as we can to get those needed resources. And maybe if I can just a quick follow-up question on that, because you mentioned also in the previous session, you were mentioning it now is not easy to receive funding. It's not easy to also receive financing, but it's something that can be supported depending on the stage of development which your project is. And sometimes at very early stage, something that helps is grant funding for research and philanthropic support. And you had some experience regarding that. So my question is, do you have, from your experience on working with philanthropic funds and with the difficulties in getting them engaged and understanding the local context, is there some learning that you may found from your work, and is there something that you would like to also signal to fellow African cities that may want to engage on the same path?
Yeah, I think the key issue is also accountability and transparency when it comes to grant funding. And I said it in the engagement I had at the other forum that we need to produce or get a special purpose vehicle when it comes to the usage of grant funding. Because some of our policies and our procedures within local authorities are quite cumbersome. And to obtain funding also in itself, it also takes quite a long time. And we said that we are not policy poor, but we're implementation poor. You'll get this grant funding and nothing will happen unless you have the relevant expertise in place to make sure that the funding goes where it is required and where it's needed, and at the speed that is also needed. So I would say that we have received, and we always learn as you go on. We have also come to realize that we have received Walfish Bay, for example, funds from the Bloomberg Philanthropies for Youth Climate Fund. Now, with our procurement processes, it takes forever to get the money to where it should be. So that is why I say that it will be advisable, or it will be very good for local authorities, especially like ours, that is not decentralized as we would like it to be, to have this SPV, a special purpose vehicle that deals and handles and uses this funding to get it to where it should be faster. I think that is one of the things that I'm very frustrated about being a local authority, is that it takes too long to get things done. For example, if you want to fix a pothole, it takes you 6 months to fix a road just because of the nature of the procurement matters. So I would say that is very much necessary if we want to have things done fast.
Thank you very much. And maybe then with this introduction, we'll just maybe give the floor to the next panelist. We change a little bit continent, but still we're still focused on the theme of the session, which is funding for Africa. So Björn Wallsten is Senior Research Officer at Formas, Sweden, and Transition Pathway Coordinator in driving European Transition, which is the European network, not only European network, of funding agencies that are committed to provide resources for research and innovation, which also speaks to this very first stage approach that we were talking about before. So maybe my very first direct question, Björn, to you would be, what DUT is and what are you doing in Africa?
Okay, thank you. I hope you all can hear me. So I'm then representing the Swedish government agency Formas, and as such, being a senior research officer in this context, but also then working quite extensively with the DUT partnership. Sweden being a small country, but having a strong track record in R&I funding, we also have quite high ambitions when it comes to internationalize R&I funding and to operate, let's say, in international funding contexts. What this implies, though, being small, is that we need to be efficient and we need to collaborate both nationally within the Swedish landscapes of agencies and funding agencies, but also strive for multilateral collaborations abroad and both internationally and globally. And one such example, which I'm representing them, would be the Driving Urban Transitions Partnership. This is something that we at Formas devote quite some resources to, and is one of the partnerships under the Horizon Europe, and it's the one tackling the urban transition issues. It's a public-public partnership on R&I, and it's co-funded and co-created by 65 partners from 28 member states. Together with the European Commission. We have an approximate budget of 450 million euros over the year from the year 2022 to 2028. And during this period, we intend and are launching 7 calls on 3 thematic focus areas, which is urban circularity, urban mobility issues, and urban energy issues. And these calls, I should say, also are part of the Mission Innovation call series. What is important to stress here when it comes to our funded projects is 2 aspects that I would like to front. And one is that we require them to have a participation from an urban public authority. And this is not only in a reference group, we refer them and want them to be part of actually formulating the research questions or innovation actions. And because we believe that this creates the grounds for transdisciplinary knowledge creation and enhances impact on the ground. First thing. Second thing is that all the projects are transnational by nature. They're required to have participants from 3 countries, and this is to allow them for exchanges between cities and to draw comparative learnings from case studies, urban living labs, approaches and studies, etc. Third component here, and an important aspect in this context, is that DUT, Driving Urban Transitions, also do continuous efforts abroad or beyond Europe, you could say, at least at 3 levels of global engagement. The first of these levels, you could say, is related to funding agencies, innovation initiatives, and programs. We are, for example, actively collaborating with the UTM, for example, when it comes to formulating and developing the respective research agendas of these programs. And it's also clear that our different initiatives have very overlapping priorities in common. Secondly, and we continuously invite and collaborate with global funding agencies in our calls. So, for example, in the last year's call and via outreach activities within Mission Innovation countries, we were able to bring in funding agencies from Canada and South Korea in the call to get to cooperate with us. And for the current call that we which is closing next week, we co-branded this with the Belmont Forum, and we're thereby able to welcome funding agencies from Brazil, Japan, and Taiwan as participating countries. So we would, of course, be happy to invite also funding agencies from the African continent to not underplay this, but so far we haven't been able to, but there's a great possibility, which would be my main message, completely understanding the difficulties and so on. The second level of global engagement from the DUT is related to stakeholder engagement and capacity building efforts, which we want to go beyond Europe and to ensure that the urban issues addressed in the DUT are connected to global contexts. To give you one example is a workshop series that we did in 2021 and 2022 together with Start International and UK Africa, and this was to explore how the focus areas of the DUT were resonating with the unique challenges faced by and in African cities. So we did a workshop on 15-minute cities in Africa, and one on just energy transitions, and one on regenerative neighborhoods. And we would be happy to engage in further such activities. The third level of engagement, as we say, we try to actively contribute to the global policy dialogues and discussions via participating in and co-organizing sessions and at major international conferences, forums, etc., such as, for example, this one, but also to mention another example, a joint session we did with GGCoM and UTM at Innovate for Cities in Montreal earlier this fall. So, summing this up, talking even faster as I go, but regardless of which of these three, let's say, levels of activities, we would be happy to further explore and try to find out exchanges between funding agencies, but also cities on the African continent.
Thank you very much, Björn. And maybe this is also the good moment to see that we were supposed to have on the panel also the Funding and Innovation Agency from Egypt. Unfortunately, they didn't manage to make it, but indeed, as you said, multinational collaborations is what can unlock also the financing to the local sector for us. And UT is a good platform for agencies to pull resources together in a more standardized manner, and with the support, of course, of its funding partners. We will also hear a little bit more regarding DUT connected projects. I see Léonard, it's aligned, so it's great. But before going to that, I will turn to Lea Ranalder. She's Associate Program Management Officer for UN Habitat in the Human Settlement Division. And she has a very important role in this panel, meaning we have spoke so far about project preparation facilities, so technical assistance, and also the step even before, which is funding for research and innovation. There is another step that may collate all of those together, which is the step of research, and this is led by the IPCC processes. And you are leading an undertaking together with the Global Covenant of Mayors to get cities being heard in the IPCC process. There has been a conference 2 months ago called Innovate for Cities that has delved into these very intensively, as has developed a new framework called GRAA. And there's been also a lot of talks about climate finance. So my question is, what have been those talks?
Thank you so much, and it's afternoon, so good afternoon, everybody. Actually, when I'm hearing now and listening to this panel, I really want to talk about sustainable procurement. It's one of these things that nobody ever wants to talk about because it sounds really nerdy, but it's such a powerful tool. But maybe we can pick that up at a different stage. So I'll come to your question. Maybe just for all of you, the IPCC has a special report on climate change in cities. And I think for the people in the cities community and in academia, this is incredibly exciting. Why? Because in this cycle, they are typically in these assessment report cycle, there are multiple special reports, 3, 4. This time around, there's only one, and it is on cities for the first time ever. And I think all of you, if there's one authority that constantly gets quoted on climate change, it is the IPCC. So, I mean, but the fact that there is a special report on climate change in cities is phenomenal. I don't think I think this might be, the only chance to really have a special report in that system being dedicated to cities. So that's absolutely critical. And maybe just to say what's also really special, that for the first time, urban practitioners were allowed to participate in this process. It's a very academic process. It's a very member state driven process. And I had the questionable honor of being on both sides of that coin. And there was a scoping meeting to write the outline. Lots of incredibly smart professors, a few urban practitioners who sat there and said, don't forget about how to turn this into, your research into actual actions. And then a couple months later in Sofia, the panel decided then on what this outline should be. So you have all these scholars and academics, 140 of them writing an outline, and then you have national governments, taking it apart. Because of course they know better. And it's very political. Cities is very, very political topic, even in research. So maybe just to say that up front, it's an exciting process. And of course, we are committed to making sure that urban practitioners and the real experiences from the ground are part of this process. Because we know what's written in this IPCC will guide decision-making. It will be a North Star for implementation, for action, and for the status of where we stand and how we can build on cities to go where we need to be. So you already mentioned it, Nicola, 2 months ago, I think 56 days ago, because we like numbers. The Innovate for Cities conference took place in Montreal, co-hosted by the Global Covenant of Mayors and UN Habitat, and I see my co-chair in the back there. He would definitely be able to talk about a lot of this in a lot more detail. And in record time, we turned what 2,000 participants said, over 200 sessions into an outcomes report. And this would probably be the moment where I should have that slide up with the QR code. But that outcomes report was launched yesterday at WOF, and really trying to get knowledge from all these practitioners, from academics, from people working on the ground, synthesized in a very short 180-page document. But maybe just because we are talking about finance, of course, that was one of the main themes running through this conference. Like how do we finance things? How do we scale up climate actions? What are the policy instruments? So I do want to highlight just a few of the knowledge gaps that were identified by this community. There's limited capacity and coordination between local and national governments. The finance question, I don't think that's surprising. The lack of political alignment on private-public partnerships. There is a big opportunity on doing this at the local level, but there's a lack of consistently integrating this. And one thing that's really important and has been emerging as a topic, not only in finance, but throughout, there's an exclusion of marginalized and vulnerable groups when it comes to climate finance. It's the topic of informality, of how do we work with informal settlements? How do we make sure that the finance goes there? Because these are the people who are most affected by climate change. They contribute the least, and they are the most affected by climate change. I mean, maybe just as on a personal note, I live in Nairobi, and there were all the floods, and people ask me, are you fine? I'm like, I am fine. But you know where the water is? It's in the slums. These people are being evicted, forcefully evicted, because the slums are filling up like a bathtub. So we need to make sure that this, of course, the finance is also going to these communities. So anyway, with that little loop, to say the last is, of course, the data information gap. Actions that were identified by these 2,000 practitioners is, there's a lot of them, but I want to pick out two that I find most appealing is, we need to not only talk about climate finance, but understand what climate finance will get us. What are the co-benefits? And I know co-benefits is maybe a word that's being differently used, but what can we get in terms of socioeconomic developments, job creations on the ground in our cities, health, I think there's nobody who says, oh, I love living in a polluted city. What are the benefits for air pollution and tackling air pollution, and the benefits for having just a more just society? And that, of course, the other action, which is then very linked to that, is we need to make sure that we have conversations with formal and informal city actors, that we make sure that the people who are most affected are also part of that conversation, especially when it is about talking money. There is an updated global research and action agenda, and there is, if you know it, there is a wheel, but there's also now a house that's really connecting all of the different things, all of the priority research and action themes into a beautiful house with solar PV on top. But that's also connected and really tries to speak to that importance of having integrated thinking at the local level. And of course, this is also a process that's separate and running and separate to the IPCC, but we really hope we can use this, Innovate for Cities, as an initiative, but also as a conference to really get the urban practitioners' voices into the IPCC. We had a lot of panel members from the IPCC at the conference who said, this is what we need. You are the voice from the ground. Let's make sure this gets into the report, because we know what's written in there. It's the only chance, and it will help us to also then get money into cities.
Thank you, Lea. And you said it's enough. I would say it's almost a skyscraper, actually, considering the entire, like the amount of topics that it covers. Of course, a sustainable built one, which is not so common, but definitely that's a lot in that, and there's a lot in that report. And you mentioned informality. You also mentioned it. Maybe we can come back to it later during the discussion, because there's a lot going on. There's a campaign called Roof Over Our Heads, which we are supporting, that tries to delve into that. And this is a topic that touches very dearly, of course, a lot of communities worldwide, but it's a lot of communities in Africa, more specifically. Maybe we spoke a lot about the Innovate for City process. Maybe just shorter question on the national involvement, what we can get out of the national involvement, what we might be getting out of the national involvement in the European continent, especially, and through a process called the National Determined Contribution, which is, of course, a UNFCCC-led process in which all countries in the world are or should be integrating their inputs for climate trialism. I don't know, Lea, if you would like to dig a little bit into what the climate finance aspects of NDCs.
Sure. I thought maybe other people want to speak fast, but happy to elaborate on that. I'm super excited about the NDCs. This is like my other big topics. Nationally determined contributions, also national, often referred to as the national climate plans. If you're following that process, it's going to be due, they say, well before COP30, in theory, in February. In practice, that we all know it's most likely going to be much later, but cities are not well reflected in the current NDCs. Only about a quarter of them reflect on cities, meaning the challenges that cities experience, the hazards that they are prone to, but also the opportunities. But I don't want to say only a quarter so far, because that means there's a big opportunity to integrate cities better into NDCs. You might say, why? Who cares? Because again, it's a financing opportunity. I mean, NDCs need implementation, but if you as a national government can say, here, this is what we are planning to do, this is really the reference document, the North Star that people will look at, and whatever is written in there can really help to pull in finance. And my favorite number, it's not a good number, but it's still my favorite number from the last NDCs, is almost all NDCs refer to the need for climate finance to achieve their targets. That's not surprising. There's a handful that make the reference to the need for climate finance at the urban level. Massive missed opportunity. I think we just heard about the need to increase investment at the local level. So it's a massive lost opportunity. And if we can have NDCs that refer to cities more, it provides a hook. I like to call it a hook, an opportunity to really make sure that when national governments come back home after COP30, that there can be a discussion. How do we now turn this into action? How can cities support achieving national climate goals through their actions? And how can we get the money there? That's my hope and maybe my call to action. If you want to learn more about this, please come talk to me. There's lots of resources that UN Habitat has available, and we're also going to be publishing, so to say, a step-by-step tool kit on how this could look like. Again, there's also many countries that don't have a lot of consideration for their national for their cities in their NDCs, and they still engage them a lot. So it's just sometimes also a matter of that not being reflected in the NDCs. But again, it's a big opportunity to make that alignment happen and to make sure it is really comprehensive, inclusive, and developed in collaboration with cities.
Thank you, Lea. And maybe just to continue with our panel, I would like to invite Léonard Lévêque. He's LIPRI coordinator at LGI, Sustainable Innovation. Léonard, can you hear us?
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Hello. Yes, great. So you mentioned, Lea, how we get funding there, and maybe and we were mentioning already about DUT. Maybe Léonard, my question for you is if you could explain to us a little bit what is the LIPRI project and what you're doing also to support African cities.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for this opportunity first of speaking in this roundtable. So my name is Léonard Lévêque. I work at LGI. You may have one of my colleagues in the room, Gianni Nardone, and we work in close collaboration with FFG, who is the kind inviter of this conference. So thank you, Ellie, for inviting us here. So yes, what we have been implementing with LIPRI is precisely the design of a bicontinental funding mechanism. So let me try to share. Yeah. Do you see my presentation now?
Yes.
Okay. So basically what we've been doing, thanks to the LIPRI program. So first, LIPRI is funded under Horizon 2020. It started in October 2020. It means the long-term Euro-African Partnership on Renewable Energy. By long-term, we had a first phase that will finish by 2026, and we are currently preparing the next steps to address 2030 and post. So actually, we implemented a co-funding mechanism in which national authorities in Europe and in Africa have the capacity to pool financial resources into a common pot. And then,
sorry, Léonard, just to interrupt you a second, it's not full screen, the presentation at the moment.
But do you confirm that it's readable like that?
Yeah, we can read it. If you want to put it full screen, you can. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, now it's better. Thank you.
Okay, so the mandate that we had initially through the Horizon 2020 mechanism was to pool a number of funders, both in Europe and in Africa, to organize calls for projects. So thanks to this mechanism, we gathered a certain number of funders that are members of the consortium. And then thanks to this financial mechanism, we organize calls for projects, so cascade funding. So FFG, Ellie, for instance, is acting as a funder in this mechanism, along with other agencies in Europe, in Portugal, France, Spain, Belgium, and so on. And in Africa, in particular in Algeria, South Africa, Egypt, and other countries. So we've been launching 2 calls for project, one in 2021 and the second one in 2022. Thanks to this, we've been funding 31 projects For the majority, they are still ongoing. And these projects, they are all addressing thematic priorities that have been designed in a preparatory phase, but they are all linked to renewable energy or sustainable energy as a whole. I give you here the list of the 6 main thematic priorities for investment that have been addressed by the consortium. So it means that through the different calls, we will fund research and innovation projects that address outputs or activities in these specific fields. One thing that is important on the financial mechanism that we implemented is that if we reach a certain threshold from the national commitment, the European Commission brings what we call a top-up, so additional European funding contribution. Also, another particularity of the mechanism is that each national funding agency obeys to national rules. So the Austrian funding agency will only fund Austrian beneficiaries. The Algerian funding agencies will only fund Algerian beneficiaries, and so on and so forth. But it is a transnational call for projects, so it's consortium-based. It's like Horizon. Actually, you need to build a transnational consortium and address the main challenges that are in the call text. Also, in order to foster the participation of African beneficiaries that are not supported by funding agencies, in the sense that the funding agency is not signatory of the grant agreement in Africa, we have a specific mechanism to establish bilateral research contract with these beneficiaries to increase the representation of non-African participating countries in the consortium. So with the set of projects that we are developing, actually, we are bringing a lot of project results, research outputs that then have a good potential to address policy recommendation, but also that can potentially be transferred to the market. Also, that can be presented to potential investor, venture capitalists, or other funder stakeholders. And knowledge and capacity building, because also the ultimate goal is to change lives on the daily life, especially of the African communities in rural and urban areas. So we also try to train people and to create a critical mass of knowledge resources that are hosted on a platform that has been designed in the framework of this project. So this is very ambitious. But actually, we have so far a common agenda with all the funding agencies. We have a common roadmap, and the action plan is clear. So we now can confirm that from the 13th of January 2025, we will launch a third call for project. This third call for project will, of course, address the main priorities that I was displaying here. But it will be enlarged also to production of green hydrogen, electric mobility, and potentially other topics as the water, food, energy nexus that maybe were not sufficiently addressed in the past. So this is the rough list of funders that are involved in the consortium so far, and the list of stakeholders that can be involved in the implementation of our activities. So directly through the consortium we are managing today, or maybe being potentially a beneficiary of the Cascade funding call that we launch. So it means that you don't see local authorities on this slide. But actually, there is no limitation, and local authorities are fully eligible to participate in our funding mechanism when it comes to bringing energy to local communities in Africa. So, for instance, if there are committed municipalities in Europe or in Africa that are working on the development of standalone system in urban or rural African areas, by bringing mini grids or by bringing innovative technologies on modern cooking, I don't know. This is basically fully in line with what we will fund. And then not to take you more time, in a nutshell, I would like to introduce what are the main features of our partnership so far. So with the support of our tech team and Gianni in particular, we've been developing a platform something quite similar to something developed in UTMC. But here we have an active community of more than 1,500 researchers in the field of sustainable energy that are participating. They will use this community management platform as a matchmaking tool in the view of the call that we will organize in January. So if you are interested, you are also invited to create an account. It's free of charge, and then you can identify potentially a project partner to build a consortium. We also have, of course, online promotion. So we have specific pages to promote the Cascade project that we've been funding. So we have been 31, but there is no limit to promote any relevant opportunity, project, or program working on sustainable energy in an African context. We have the capacity to organize international events on an annual basis. So last one was in Milan a few weeks ago, and we look forward to organizing something in 2025, most likely in Africa. I would be happy to have something in Addis Ababa, with the support of the African Union Commission, but well, it's in the pipe, but not confirmed at this stage. We also organize peer-to-peer activities around thematic clusters, following the main priorities that we found. Acceleration services. So this is something that we are trying to do, but we are looking for additional funding for that. The idea is that within the 31 project portfolio, we have different levels of maturity. Some projects are managed by both consortium members, representative from the private sector and the public sector. And actually, some private companies involved in the action, they have significant concrete project outputs, like a demonstrator, a prototype of solar cooker, like a demonstrator of UV cells to clean water and provide drinking water to the local communities. So we have very concrete outputs that now needs to enter to the market or scale up, or just simple action to transfer the lab results to the market. So this is something that we are currently doing, but once again, we will lack some financial capacity on that. Training and capacity building activities, project management support. So it's not a detail when it comes to cooperating with the African continent. There is a high set of activities to strengthen our beneficiaries' capacities on administrative and financial management, especially when it comes to EU funding. Impact assessment, we are also, with the support of Gianni, supporting the deployment of an online monitoring platform to collect data in itinerary and compare the data collected with the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, notably. And we have also a set of activities related to open access and scientific dissemination. So just some simple illustrations of what we do. So we have been delivering a prototype of solar vehicle in Stellenbosch University. We are also working on modern cooking technology, geothermal capacities, and so on and so forth. So you may see here that there is a direct interest and potential involvement of local authorities in the mechanism, in the initiative, but also in the co-funding mechanism that I introduced. So thanks again to Ellie and the colleagues for giving us this opportunity. The idea here is to find a way to engage with additional local authorities. I've been trying in the last years to discuss with the COM SSA, to ask them to promote the calls, to see how it could be also falling in their action plan, but it did not give a clear action plan of what we could do. So any recommendation from your side would be also interesting to hear about how we can better involve the local authorities in the implementation of this initiative. So just in terms of identity, we will now move from LEAP-RE, Renewable Energy, to LEAP-SE, Sustainable Energy. So still, it's not maybe not very attractive name, but we are working also on updating the identity so that it's maybe a bit more explicit and less bureaucratic. But if you are interested, everything will be online on the LEAP-RE website. And of course, you can get in touch with us directly through Gianni or Ellie. So over to you, and I remain available for any reaction or question.
Thank you very much, Léonard. And this is very, very exciting, especially for the next call in January. And you said, let's see how to engage cities. Let's pick this up also after this event and see how we can connect more on this. Just one quick follow-up question, almost a yes and no question. You have a call coming up now in January. We have a platform. We have a lot of cities on those platforms that would be eager potentially to apply to this call. What about using the platform to get them involved? I'm talking about UTMC.
Sorry, I did not get the question. Sorry.
I was just mentioning regarding the potential use that we can make of UTMC to support the call and support especially the local authorities that are part of it to join and develop applications together.
Well, our ambition here is to centralize into one single community. So this is the aim of the platform that we design. And by platform, I don't only talk about the online web platform that Gianni and the colleagues developed, but having an annual meeting in Europe and Africa also is part of developing this platform. So I really encourage you to use LIPRI features. Of course, you can use UTMC 1 to start designing concept and promoting our initiative, but then I will recommend that everything related to the preparation of a potential consortium is centralized on the LIPRI initiative, let's say.
Okay, yeah, understood. And I think we can definitely work also towards that. But yeah, let's keep the conversation going, I would say. And maybe now, looking at the time, I think we're still about 20-25 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. So I will just lead to the next part of the panel, and maybe I would like to introduce Olle Dierks, the head of large-scale investments and chairman of this Sweden's Smart Cities from Viable Cities. Olle, you heard also from fellow panelists the importance also of, among others, procurement, but also about innovation and system innovation. So my question for you, you did launch or you did speak about in the past days during both about something called Joint Initiative on System Demonstrators. I just would like to ask you if you can tell us, let us a little bit through the concept and the idea of what you would like to see, especially for cities in Global South, of course, but in Africa specifically.
Right. So thank you so much, and thank you for having me. Humbled that we're two Swedes in this panel in a very big continent. So hope that I can add bits of insights of what we've been working on so far. So yes, I'm Olle Dierks from the Viable Cities. We are a Swedish strategic innovation program focusing on the climate neutral and smart cities mission by 2030. So today we have 23 Swedish cities that we fund. We mainly fund their capacity building, so the governance structures. So we have around 100 million euro or dollars approximately for funding. But the point is that this would leverage even more funding. I think that the same mechanism can also be used in many other places. So a bit more to your question and also for the thematic today. When it comes to unlocking finance, I think there are a couple of key things that would need to happen. So one would be to find the right cities and the actors in the cities to work with. And you have already started that. I mean, both with UTMC, of course, and Mission Innovation, and also LIPRI. So there are a number of those initiatives. But I think that we can even strengthen the way that we find the cities to work with and build the capacity with these cities. So MIUTM is a very important step in that direction. The other important part when it comes, I think that the 1% figure we heard from John Michael, that's just devastating low, given that the needs are also here on this continent. So I think that the question is also to find right donors. Some are here in this room or perhaps on the call, and some are Swedish. So it's also a matter of how can we sort of commit to further strengthen finance for Africa and also other emerging markets. And then I think when moving forward, we need to become even better at making the case for scaling for impact towards climate. So what that would mean. So I'm going to mention, like, briefly on your question here on system demonstrators, how we've been working with one city in Africa. So it's Makindi Sapagabo in Uganda. We found this city through an open call, partnering with UN Habitat back in 2021. We had the open call was open for any city anywhere in the world, no funding available. The only thing that we had available at the time was a collaboration with UN Habitat and with us, 5 cities, and Vinova and some other partners. By not having money at that point, I think one trick was that we found cities that were truly committed. The other thing that they did, they competed with their challenges. So the challenges in a way, in order to sort of work on climate or other positive benefit issues, Makindi Sapagabo was one of the winners in this. They are focusing on affordable and zero carbon housing. There were 3 other cities, including Bristol, Curitiba, and Bogota. In Bristol, the focus was also on affordable and zero carbon housing and new financial models for this. So what we did together with, again, UN Habitat was to define the challenge deeply. So UN Habitat had a team of many that worked with the cities, going into the system perspective and of everything, and then opening up the challenge, which we did at the Expo Dubai in 2021, to come with innovative solutions to this. So we now had a team of innovators working for each of the cities, and they were awarded funding from Sweden to plan for, yes, a system demonstrator. So that was not a lot of money at all, but we gave it to them to work with, to sort of find out how they would attract the funding. Bristol, they solved it by themselves. So they put 10 million pounds into their system demonstrator with 6 sites for affordable housing. It's been much harder for Makindi Sapagabo. We work closely with Alex Kivumbi from Makindi, and he's the head of fundraising. And we're looking at sort of different multiple sources. We're now also working together with CCFLA to find out which would be the best donor. But we strengthened the finance for Makindi together with Vinova, which is another government agency in Sweden that's supported with an extra $300,000 approximately to just the planning. Now, what I do believe that would be needed to take this further is to have clear cases of actors such as Makindi Sapagabo, where there is true commitment to working long term, both with important housing questions and also with new ways of getting affordable housing on the ground and also on the climate. And then from that to have a number of different options for the funding. And then to see how with the insights from such system demonstrators, how can we scale them? And the key thing here, I think on Lea's point before, is on procurement or on purchases. Because quite often we talk about scaling technologies. Of course, that can be happening. But the insights that comes from such system demonstrators is also in the policy nature on standardizations and a lot more. And this can be turned into procurement documents in many cities around the world, around in Africa, so that they can be used to have like de-risked investments. Once you have that clearly stated, then there is like a bigger potential to work like with African development banks and others. So this is something that we hope to achieve. And now, yes, we soft launched a joint initiative for system demonstrators for climate neutral cities. We want to connect Makindi Sapagabo deeper with the other system demonstrators that we have in our portfolio so that we can learn from each other. And we want to add more also from Asia, because I think it's important not to have it like one continent at a time, but that we do this together as well. So I'll finish off by just getting back to what I said in the beginning, that I think it's important that we continuously work with models for how we find the cities that we work with, and that we make sure that we're there for the long term. So we are in a partnership with McKinney-Sabagabo. The same would be with other cities. I think that's very important. Then the other would be to find the donors and agree on goals. So together with UN Habitat, we've set in the Climate Smart Cities Challenge, we set a goal of mobilizing $300 million. Viable Cities, together with some other government agencies and also Sweden-US Green Transition Initiative, committed to at least try to gather $10 billion for climate action in cities. We have now promised to create a fund to support this mission. I'm responsible for that, and I'll be happy to sort of focus much more on Africa in that, and also in Southeast Asia. And then when it comes to making the case for scaling and impact, it cannot, again, only be about the technologies. It has to be about strengthening the capacity so that we can make sure that the money is used in the right way. I finished that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Olle. And yeah, you touched all the important points. Thank you very much for that. Is indeed a very interesting, more nerdy, as we were saying before, topic, but an important one that can definitely leverage funds. And as you were saying before, commitment is important. So of course, money should come at a point. They need to reach the right targets, but to make it work, you definitely need long-term commitment. And also an early start, so to say, as you did for the system demonstrators. So thank you very much. And now I will just like to give the floor to the last speaker in the panel before also opening for Q&A. Shaden Al Galaly, you are City Advisor for the MENA region for the EIB World Bank Gap Fund Partnership. Would you like to get us through a little bit? We have seen a little bit of the numbers. We did see what it gets from the very early funding stage to research and innovation, and then to the actual technical assistance in this whole very, very long first part of the journey for cities to get financing. So will you get us a little bit through what the technical system of GAF Fund is?
Yes, thank you. Will there be a presentation, or if not?
Yeah, we should have the slides. Yeah, there. Sorry, that's the other set of slides. Just a moment. Yes, that's the right one. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Okay, so thank you so much for having me to represent the GGCoM Gap Fund Partnership. I'm happy to introduce the Gap Fund to everyone here and share some insights. So the Gap Fund is a global trust fund that was established in 2020 with an initial capital of 105 million euros. And as John Michael has introduced, it's a PPF. It's one of the PPFs in the ecosystem that it has a mission of supporting cities in emerging and developing countries by providing the critical early stage technical assistance that they need to have robust and investment-ready bankable projects. So the aim of the Gap Fund is to unlock up to 4 billion euros in sustainable urban investments and help cities implement impactful climate smart projects. Next slide, please. So the Gap Fund is implemented by the World Bank and EIB, and also the support of GIZ. It's funded by the German and Luxembourg governments and in partnership with technical institutions such as C40 Cities, the Global Covenant of Mayors, ICLEI, and CCFLA. So the GGCoM Gap Fund Partnership, which I am a part of, the support team at this partnership, it aims to raise awareness about the Gap Fund as an opportunity and a resource for cities, as when the Gap Fund has started, they have seen that they are not receiving strong enough expression of interests from the cities, so they needed a specific project support team to support the cities with the AOIs and to help them prioritize the project ideas. So we also provide direct assistance to the cities, and we use the resources, we leverage the resources with them that is available by the partners. For example, the tools and resources that UNAPIDAT has, the NDCs, and we also help them align their project idea with the national priority and the climate action plans, for example. We also provide different workshops and tools and knowledge sharing events to make sure that the cities are ready for the technical assistance and to have all the information on climate finance and project preparation as they can. So some of the support services that the GAP Fund provides include, of course, everything in the early stage of the technical assistance and the pre-feasibility stage. So supports range from activities for climate action development to assessment of the climate potential of actions, plans and strategies, supporting the prioritization of investments, project concept design and assessments, and definition, and then impact assessments, the social, environmental, and economic assessments that the project will create. And then also the financial structuring and connecting cities with potential partners that can implement those projects as well. So matchmaking with potential funding institutions. So the focus is on early stage project preparation because we think research says that it's the key to success for urban climate projects. As for example, in the CCFLA report, it shows that 3 to 5% of project costs are from project preparation and going up to 10% in emerging countries. So having the GAP Fund as a resource to help with the early stage technical assistance removes the financial burden from the cities. So, and then it can make or break project viability. So the eligibility criteria is very simple for the GAP Fund to apply. First, it has to be an OECD eligible country, so a developing country. It has to have the ownership of the local municipality or government, and then it has to have a climate focus and an urban focus. I'm sorry, I forgot to. Okay. And then there's a range of different eligible sectors, such as you can see, from sustainable urban mobility to energy efficiency, solid waste management. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide, sorry, just for time, for the sake of time. Okay, so some of the, slide before, yes. So we received more than 200 project ideas from different cities around the globe. So we work in all the regions. For example, in Africa, we have received 83 project ideas. And of all those project ideas, 53 were sent EOIs to the GAP Fund and 34 deemed eligible only in the past 6 months. Next slide, please. Next slide, sorry, at the same time. Okay, and for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, as you can see here, many project ideas lie on adaptation, and a lot of project ideas come from energy efficiency as well. And now I'll go to some case studies from Africa that has received already the technical assistance from the GAP Fund. So the first is, next slide, please, sorry. Okay, so the first, Mombela in South Africa has received technical assistance from the World Bank, and the city wanted to enhance climate resilience by implementing a comprehensive stormwater management system and flood protection measures and nature-based solutions. So the GAP Fund support came in by doing a pre-feasibility study for the stormwater management, and then also scaling up and integrating citywide riverine management and stormwater initiatives. Next slide, please. And then another technical assistance was done also by the World Bank in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire. So the GAP Fund support included identification of NBS opportunities, the provision of technical recommendations on the types of NBS to be prioritized, and the co-benefits of the different types of NBS, and then also the locations for their implementation. So when the city has this kind of documents or technical assistance, they can then go to the funding institution and tell them we have the data, we have the studies, and now it will be more viable and for funding to be implemented. Next slide, please. And then the third example is from Kinshasa in DRC. It was supported also by the World Bank and as well in adaptation. So the World Bank has mapped all the natural assets and identified the potential NBS locations in Kinshasa. And then they did the selection, the costing, and prioritization of NBS intervention per potential location. And also they did a development for an NBS strategy, and they piloted the NBS strategy recommendations at project scale for erosion control investment. And then the last case study was done by EIB, the European Investment Bank, they have conducted a comprehensive analysis of various municipal organic waste treatment methods for different municipalities. So also something that the GAP Fund can do is that they can aggregate project ideas of different cities from the same country to have a bigger impact on more people and populations. And then they also established a collaborative framework for working together on organic waste recovery between the different municipalities, and they ensured informed and evidence-based decision making while conducting the pre-feasibility studies. Next slide, please. Okay, so just quickly, the application process is open on a rolling basis for cities, and if you need any support, please contact us. We're here for support to prioritize your project ideas, and also especially if you're from Africa or the Middle East and North African region. I'm working specifically on Middle East and North Africa, so I would be happy to support anytime. So please contact us.
Thank you very much, Shaden. There's a very quick clarification follow-up question, if I'm not mistaken. There is also a team for Sub-Saharan Africa, but if I'm not mistaken, this is project specific. So if the city has applied already, but there's another project in mind, there might be possibility still for finding another project. If I'm not mistaken, maybe you can.
So, for example, if Kinshasa applied again in a different project, yes, sure.
Yeah, just to clarify that. Yeah,
yes, and just to clarify, the World Bank, for example, prioritizes more upstream projects, and then EIB prioritizes downstream. So if a city already received, for example, an upstream technical assistance, then they can receive something from EIB more downstream. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. He wants to get to lunch as well. Thanks. Yeah, well, also my mic wants to get lunch. So just to thank you very much to all the panelists. Maybe just a couple of minutes. I don't know if there is any question from the audience. We have gone through a lot of topics, and yeah, it's of course we. Yeah, please, Laura.
I was just wondering, and this is a question, of course, for all of you, if you could just remind the participants here in one sentence who they should talk to during the lunch break, because this will be a moment for you after hearing the presentations to go to the right person, right? So just remind them again of the sources of funding that you offer and what kind of organizations they are addressed to, right? So that during the lunch break, they can easily put a face and make the link with the specific stream of funding.
Thank you, Laura. Indeed, a really good point. Maybe I'll start here. I know that you might not be here for the lunch break, but maybe if you want just to quickly say.
So unfortunately, I will have to leave to go to another event, but you actually should talk to Nicola. If you have a project that you would like to find support from a PPF, maybe from the GAP Fund, maybe from another for technical assistance, to go to the project preparation resource directory you can find in the UTM app or on the CCFLA website, citiesclimatefinance.com. And you can find resources there with contact information on how to get connected.
Right, so obviously what he said. I'm representing Sweden. The Swedish money is not super big. I mean, we have Swedish Development Agency, SIDA, and so on. I'd be happy to connect with them. But if you're interested to do innovative projects such as system demonstrations, please talk to me. That's one angle. Another would be on procurement, or we really want to work with cities that will aggregate purchases within one city or perhaps several cities at the same time. And we're trying to find out what would be the best way of financing such actions. So that I'd be happy to collaborate about it.
Thank you. If you have a project idea for Africa, please contact me or let's discuss together, or also Nicola for the UTM anytime at lunch or after.
Yeah, and if there are any representatives from an African funding agency, I'm happy to talk to you about possible collaborations with the DFT in this context, but also, and if there are African cities here, I will also be available for any discussions on any of our stakeholder engagement activities that we have upcoming. So please get in touch.
Talk to me if you want to learn more about acronyms. How to get urban practitioners into the IPCC so we can collectively make sure that it's a strong document for all of us, and then how to get cities more into the NDCs as an opportunity to attract finance. And otherwise, talk to Nicola, of course.
So you don't talk to me when you need finance, you talk to me when you want to give finance. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, fellow panelists.